I do understand their benefit value that you continue to come. The interesting thing is, as we've gone online, the whole experience has changed. So because I'm a cognitive load theorist, I very much think of everything in terms of the load and in terms of cognitive load theory. When you come to a live lecture, it's a very embodied experience, okay? The way memory works is when we embody our memories, we get much better recall of the information. So the fact that you're physically sitting here and you're immersed in the experience, your recall and understanding of the information does get enhanced. The reality, though, is we now all lead busy lives. It takes you a long time to get onto campus, and the recording can at times be useful. One of the advantages of the recording that I'm very aware of from a cognitive load perspective is if I'm, say, talking about something you already know a lot about, you can fast forward and play it at a different speed, or if you didn't understand what I said, you can replay it. So I do understand the benefits of the recording, but there's no question that the embodied experience in terms of learning actually helps recall and memory if you are sitting in a face-to-face lecture. So I hope I continue to see some of you engaging in the face-to-face. The other thing, just to point out, originally this course was developed by Sasha, who now teaches some of our other courses, and some of the materials are hers, and then our old head of school, Erin Quigley, taught it for a year as well, and I've been teaching, I think it's 3 or 4 years now. I will go through a bit of housekeeping as I go along and tell you a bit more about the structure of the course. I've changed some things this year compared to last year as well, and then I'll go into a little bit more of covering the content. Okay, so the other thing I'll point out to you is we've tried using different LMSs for the course at different points in time, and none of them are great in terms of usability. When we used Web CMS, there was nowhere to submit some of your assignments, and we had to have a separate submission link. When we used something else that had a better forum, there were some other things that were missing, and so on and so on. So we've chosen Moodle because over the years I've got feedback from students. None of the solutions are ideal. They all have their ups and downs, but Moodle seems to support most of our things that we need in one place. And having to open 2 or 3 different tools is not ideal either. So that's why we've gone with Moodle. I'm aware it's not a perfect solution, but we've tried a few others over the years, and we tried Teams the one year that created other problems. So I'm sorry that we teach you about design and we're giving you an interface that isn't that well designed. So, but that's the reality of what we're dealing with. All right, so I'm going to go through housekeeping, I'm going to go through the assessment, and then I'm going to introduce you to mobile app development space and some design thinking. And the other thing is, the lecture tomorrow is online. The reason the Wednesday lecture is online is it's run by Dennis Gannon. I'll introduce him on one of the later slides. But he's in industry and he can't physically get himself onto campus, which is where the online does work. You get access to an expert in industry and it gives you access to that sort of thing. What it means is, to avoid confusion, I'm going to deliver the second part of this lecture tomorrow online in place of Dennis, and from week 2 Dennis will take over the Wednesday lectures, which are online. All right, so basically, this is just a very basic history of computing. I just took it to the early 2000s, and the idea is that, we started off with very much mainframes and mini computers, and we worked towards workstations, and we're now very much in the mobile computing space, but we're probably moving more into the AI space, and it's going to change the way things work into the future. The key thing is, about this course, we are teaching you design thinking skills, okay, and design skills. Those skills will take you into the future regardless of the technology, okay? We're teaching you React Native as well, because it's a practical skill and it'll help you in industry, but it's almost more important that you have the design skills, because the technology is going to be ever evolving. The technology that you use now is going to be very different in 5 years' time, and therefore the broader design skills are what are going to keep you current and allow you to evolve. And for that reason, and I'll come into that, I've got slides about it as well, for that reason, we're actually trying to keep you away from the AI in the course, and I'll explain that. I've got it on a later slide, I'll come back to that. But the key thing is that we don't know what the technology is going to do, so we're designing things with that in mind. All right, and this is also just a slide that the idea of a computer and a UX is evolving all the time, in the UI as well. Okay, and we're actually at the point now where you can display things on your skin and your body. Wearable computing is now current. You can actually use your own body as a display. Okay, there's a lot of UI issues around this, and the question is, do you actually want to project things on your own skin? Will it overheat, or are you worried about maybe some of the other things that you're putting onto your body? But we're actually at a point where we can do that. So it's an ever-evolving space, and the idea of an interface is becoming more and more immersed in our day-to-day environment, to the point where, at the moment it's something like this, but eventually it may actually be something that you can't even see anymore, because it's just so part of our everyday lives. And so when we design, we keep in mind that the idea of a computer is changing over time. And this is just really to show you a little bit of where we're at in terms of immersive environments and the HoloLens. Already the AI is changing some of this. But all right, so the first thing I want to do is get you to go into the collaborative whiteboard, okay? I'll put up a link in a second and a QR code, but for anyone else who doesn't want to do it that way, there is a link in Moodle as well. So you all should be enrolled in Moodle and be able to get into Moodle. If you can't get into Moodle, it's a problem, you need Moodle, please email myself, or Malia. I'll put up a slide with our details as well to let us know the issues. Okay, so the brainstorming I'm going to do is, you all own some sort of mobile device. When it's lost, what would you say to others? What do you call it? Okay, so here's the link, and here's the QR code, and I'll let you all get in.
Hold up.
you can't get into the whiteboard. And let's see what it says. Do not have access. So there's some sort of permission we haven't set, hey? Let me go and look at the permissions, thank you. Okay, sorry, I'm going to go look at the permissions, thank you. All right, I'll come back to that. It's clearly not going to work. I tell you what, I'm going to put the whiteboard up here, and I'm going to do the brainstorming. I'm just going to type, as you say, until we can sort it out. It's really weird because the security settings are set to anyone in UNSW, so I don't know why it's doing that. Okay, what do people call their mobile device? If they've lost it, what do you say you can't find?
My phone.
Sorry. The other thing I warn you is I'm a Mac user and I keep touching the wrong keys because it becomes very automatic. And I used to tell people that if you put someone in a Windows environment, you're a Mac user, you keep touching, and they thought, oh, what's wrong with her? And then one day they were put in a Mac environment and they said, oh, and it was someone in the early 20s, and they said, oh, we know exactly what you feel like now. It's got nothing to do with your age. So just so you know, it's totally automatic what keys for me to press, and I find it very hard to suppress it, and I keep pressing the wrong things. So I apologize. But if I bring my Mac into the environment, there's problems with recording from a Mac, and it sometimes blocks the lecture recording. So I don't take a chance because I've had to re-record a whole 2-hour lecture when I come with my Mac, and it's not worth it. Okay, so phone, what else do people call it? Sorry? Okay, so what would you say? So you'd say like your Samsung. Okay, or what else would you say? iPhone, okay.
Wow, this is just bad Excalibur.
Anything else people would call it? Mobile? All right, now the next question was, sorry, I'm getting the questions up in front of me, was what proportion of your time do you use to actually make calls on this device? What proportion would you, because you've all used a word that implies calling and phoning, what proportion of your time do you actually use to call? So I'll go through and point and just guess at a number. What would you say? 10%, okay. Percent?
10%? But I'm using
Sorry,
like 0%.
so I'll hold the microphone and hold the shift.
Whoa, why is it so trash?
Does someone else want to hazard how long they spend using it as a phone? 15%?
Oh, that's low.
Yep. Okay. Can you see this? You can, okay, you can all start typing now. Thank you, Lydia. Maybe it's because we updated the permissions, we haven't updated the link or something. Okay, thank you. Put in a guesstimate of the amount of time you use to actually use it as a phone, because all the words you've got there, cell phone, Samsung, iPhone, they're all about talking. So what would you guess? It doesn't have to be accurate, just a guesstimate. Everyone type in something. Sorry? You're still not in. All right, I'm going to carry on typing. Give me some more numbers. Someone else put their hand up and guesstimate. There's 2 links on the announcement, the second one. Because the first one was when the permissions seemed to be wrong, and we updated them. Can you get in now? Thank you, Amelia. So for those of you listening to the lecture, we'll delete the first link that doesn't work in Moodle, but we've updated it. It had to do with permissions that unfortunately weren't saved when we went in. Once again, this is another example of too much security. This is just a shared whiteboard. Why do you need this much security to share a whiteboard? In terms of design and your users, you've locked them out from being able to learn and do a basic task because you made the security permissions, which I had set to share with everyone. It didn't save them, and then you were locked out. So sorry, when I teach design and then I'm locked out of all these things, as a user, I get very frustrated. It's important to have security if you're in a banking app or if you're doing something where people's information can be compromised, but a shared whiteboard. Or you know, and I mean Moodle, yes, you need security, you know, to some degree, but even my emails, the one day I changed my phone providers and they took 3 weeks to update. There was a problem with the phone provider. I couldn't get into anything. So we've become so security conscious that we actually make basic things that people do day to day harder and harder. So I'm not sure what the solution is, but when you're designing your group projects in this course, think about that in terms of the users. Which is more important for the user experience, and how do you make users still feel safe but not make it so hard to get in that they can't use the system? All right, so the proportions here are anywhere from 5% to 40. More people are saying at the lower end, okay? The important thing about this brainstorming exercise, okay, is that we've got to the point where we have a device that was originally designed as a phone, and the scrolling on this mouse is exactly the opposite to the mouse I've got. at my computer, and I keep scrolling the wrong direction. It's also the whole automated thing. So if I keep doing that, I apologize. I've just worked out why I keep getting it wrong. So we've designed this device. Originally, it came from a phone. We still call it a phone, but it's not what we use it for most of the time, okay? Which means if you go and you ask your users what they call something or how they refer to it, it may not actually tell you about what they're actually doing, which is why it's so important to not just talk to your users about what they think is going on, but to actually observe them in action. Because it would be very misleading if you talk about your phone and you think that that's the main activity that people are involved in. So that's something that I want people to be able to think about. And part of that is about empathy and empathizing with your users. And one of the important things we're going to talk about in this course is empathizing in terms of design. All right. Malia, maybe while I'm putting on you can just draw a square around this and leave this out so I can use a different part of it. And maybe just save it so I've got a record of it. And thank you. All right. Because it's become so important, it lands up affecting the others. But thank you for your question. That's a good question, so thank you. All right, so this is just the mobile phone as it's evolved over time. And if you sort of look at, originally it was a very sort of clunky interface. They referred to this as the brick because it was about the size of a brick. And then this was one of the first smaller ones. And then we've got to the point now where we've got foldable devices. And we've got the Newton here, which allowed you to send messages, which back in its day was quite a big deal. And the whole thing with the foldable phone now is will we get to a point where we can see things on both sides, okay, of the screen? And do we want things on both sides of the screen? Does it mean, think about it, if you've suddenly got more screen space, what happens to your privacy? You're standing there with the device and suddenly people can see the other side. So we're at the point where the engineering doesn't yet allow us to do that, but once the engineering allows us to do that, is it something we even want? So the space keeps changing, and we need to evolve with things. So that's something to be aware of. All right, so what are the objectives of this course? I haven't even got to that part. Is to extend paper-based user-centered design techniques that you were exposed to in 3.5 or 9.5.1. To get you, well, it's not really introduce electronic prototyping because you've got some exposure, but to extend that as well from the Figma to the React Native. To get practical coding and development skills using React Native to design and then build your user experience and provide more experience in usability testing of mobile software applications. And at the conclusion of the course, what you are expected to have done is taken your idea from the design to the conceptualization at the point where you have a running, working React Native-based electronic prototype, which is much more advanced than, say, a Figma. And basically, you're going to look at brainstorming, research sketches, design and implementation. When I talk about paper, it is still something very much encouraged because that whole idea that you can take a piece of paper, scrunch it up and throw it in the bin, the minute you put something onto a screen or onto an interface, you get tied to it. It's not nearly as quick and easy to just get rid of. But you can use Balsamiq if you want to. So we've given you access to Balsamiq. And then for electronic prototypes, there's Figma. And then your mobile beta app will be in React Native. Right, and this is just the course people. If you've got any issues, we encourage you, if it's a personal issue, please email Malia or myself. If it's something that other students are likely to have as misunderstanding or clarification, please use the forums, okay? And when you use the forums, please use meaningful headings so that other people can see your question and perhaps not repeat the same question again. And those are the tutors. It's Malia, who's the course admin here. He's also one of the tutors. And I haven't actually given you an opportunity to introduce yourself to the students. And because I may forget, can I give you the microphone? Malia's been involved with the course for HCI for many years now, probably more than 5 years, and she's my MPhil student, and she may become a PhD student as well.
Hi everyone, I recognize some of you actually from HCI, like at least a few, so it's nice to see that you're doing the course. So as Nadine mentioned, so I did this course back when I was an undergrad student, so I think it was 2017. Actually, I did HCI in 2017, and then I did 4.5 in 2018. And then I started tutoring the course shortly after that, and I've been involved with this in 4.5 for quite some time. So it's been great, and I've been able to kind of take this work into my research as well, so it's been very useful. And I think if some of you are interested in carrying on in research, I think you'll also find this course again very useful like HCI. So I look forward to seeing some of you in the tutorials. I will be having probably some of you, so next week. And yeah, so welcome to the course.
And we're very lucky to have Malia on board as such an experienced tutor and course admin. So thank you, Malia. And the other tutors are James, Sylvia, and Olivia. And then Dennis has been lecturing for the course from industry for about 4 years now. I've got a slide introducing him, so I'll wait till I get there. I tend to jump ahead of my slides, so I apologize. But this is just you can tell who your tutor is based on which tutorial you're in. I'm just going to point out a few things about tutorials. You need to stick to your enrolled tutorial because this is where the assignment work takes place. There's something due or marked in almost every week of tutorials. Therefore, you need to attend your tutorial or else you miss out on whatever's going on. Okay? We're going to release the specs for the group project later today, and I encourage you to start thinking about the brainstorming and the early steps of the assignment before you even get to your week 2 tutorial, because then you can go through the first steps with your group and start working on it. The other thing is the groups are ideally 3 or 4 people, okay? If there are issues around that, we can accommodate groups of 2. On odd occasions, we've had to do 5. I prefer not to do 5. It causes other issues. And if people need any sort of concessions, there's definitely scope for individual assignment. And the good thing about an individual one is if you need extensions or you can't meet deadlines for whatever reason, we can actually take your needs better into consideration. So if anybody needs an individual assignment, please come and talk to me or your tutors, and we can definitely work with you to meet your needs if that's needed. And the important thing with individual is you'll have reduced scope and reduced output. Therefore, it's not going to be the same as this large group project. So it won't be the same thing, just in case anyone's concerned about that. We do make sure we meet everyone's needs as best as possible. All right, there's one online class. Sylvia's giving that. The thing that we've actually found is that the students really value the face-to-face, and that's the feedback we've got. So we've only got one online class as a result. It is a small course because it's very project-based. The other thing is we try and react to feedback, and I've changed the assessments based on that, and I'll get to that on one of the later slides. Important. The tutorials are actually officially 2 hours, but if you see, you've all been scheduled 3 hours. The reason is the tutor's there for 2 hours, but we know that it takes more than 2 hours of your time to work together as a group towards the group deliverables, and you've all got an extra hour of timetable time in the lab to carry on working together. And we found that the feedback from students was they valued this, so that's why there's 3 hours there. And you're here in the live lecture, so you know about that. And the Wednesday one is online because that's the one Dennis gives. I'll just be doing tomorrow's one, and then from next week, Dennis gives the lectures. Design diaries are very much part of the course, the way they are for 35111. I'll go through what's involved in them. I've got it on a later slide. And your tutorial starts in week 2, and the group project starts straight away. So make sure you come to class. And this is Dennis. Dennis is a software engineer at Canva. He was at Atlassian before that, and he's been a guest lecturer since 2020. Very experienced and knowledgeable. I encourage you to come into the live lectures with Dennis because what we've done is we keep changing based on student feedback. But the feedback I got in the past was that the React Native, the students didn't engage in it early enough in the course, and then they got to the end and they were panicking, and they struggled to finish. So I created a week 3 in-class exercise and a week 8 in-class exercise. Then the feedback I got was, it was so much work and we didn't get enough marks for it. If we're going to put all that work in, we'd like more marks. So this year, the React Native, there's 2 activities and the marks have gone up to try and give you reward for the amount of effort involved. But if the first one's in week 3, if you don't come to the Genesis live lecture in week 2 and you're falling behind, you're going to find that first activity quite difficult. So I encourage you to therefore attend because we've actually pushed up the marks around the React Native exercises based on the student feedback. And I react to feedback each year. So if there's something you feel isn't working, I try and take it on board and make sure that it's a better student experience. So please, if I've gone the other extreme this time, you need to tell me so the next cohort of students benefit from the feedback I get. All right. So you'll get opportunities to ask most of your questions from your tutors. If they can't answer it, they'll pass them on to me. And if it's most questions are questions that everyone will have, feel free to post them on Moodle. Just remember UNSW Code of Conduct, keep things polite, make sure that it's not done in an angry or aggressive way, and it's a place to share ideas. The other thing is, it's an opportunity. It's a very evolving and changing space, particularly with AI in the space. If you find an interesting article, put it in the forum, share it with the other people. I try and share things with you as I find it. I get the tutors to try and do it. But please, as students, share with each other as well. It's an opportunity to learn as a community if you do that as well. So please feel free to use the general channel for that sort of thing as well. Okay. I've spoken about Moodle and just using meaningful headings. There's a forum for each deliverable. There's a React Native one, there's a design diary one, and there's group project one. Everything else goes in the general forum. Just remember meaningful headings, so other people can see the answers as well. Moodle, they keep changing the look and feel of Moodle. It's probably better than it was before, except the first 2 or 3 times I use it, I can't find anything each time they change the layout. But anyway, it's actually not a bad user experience. So this is what it looks like this year, if you haven't used Moodle recently. And okay, this is the part I know you're most interested in. So the React Native is now worth 10%. It was worth less last year. But the key big change is your design diary is now worth 40%, okay? The reason it's worth 40% is the feedback I got from students is that there were too many deliverables and too many things due and the workload was too heavy. So what we've done is we've taken the individual reflection and we've made it part of the design diary. And students complained that they were putting something in the design diary and then putting it in the reflection and they were repeating themselves. And we've taken away the in-class presentation because the students were just saying it was one too many things. So it means, though, that your design diary now is worth a lot of marks, okay? But it includes the individual reflection. I've also gone and changed the individual reflection a little bit as well. So I'm trying to make sure people still learn, that you gain the skills, that we support you in gaining the knowledge, but also making it more manageable. So and the group project's 50%. And it can be an individual project. So please, if there's a reason why you need that extra support and concessions, we're happy to work with you and reduce the scope significantly to give you an individual. And I find that if people, for whatever reason, can't make the deadlines and they have some sort of ELS support in place, the individual project works really well because they don't feel the stress of having to keep up with the pace and let other people down in their group, and we can give them the concessions that they need. So just come talk to me if you need to. All right, so the React Native, there are 2 components in week 3 and week 8. The week 3 component is worth 3%, and the week 8 component is worth 7%. And as I say, we took the student feedback from last year on board, and we've made it worth a bit more. The design diary, okay, so we've set up OneNote for you again because that's what all of you are familiar with from 3511. You don't have to use OneNote. You're submitting a PDF. So you're welcome to use the OneNote. Milia, we haven't made it available yet, have we? Okay, by tomorrow, it'll be visible to you, but it's not yet visible. The only purpose of the MS Teams group is to give you access to OneNote. It's not for communication or any other thing. But the other thing is you will set up groups for your projects, and you'll be able to have project communication via that, and your tutors will be part of each of your groups so that they can give you advice and you can contact them via the groups. But the tutors can sort that all out in the tutorial, so don't worry about that for now. So the design diary, the first submission in week 5 is worth 15%, and the week 10 is worth 25%. And the week 10 has that individual reflection that used to be separate, that we've reduced the scope and what's expected of you. There will be design diary exercises in class, so please make sure that those are included. It's also meant to be a place to sketch and keep a log of your ideas and activities as you go along. The other thing is if you're in a group project and there's any disagreement about who did what or any misunderstandings, we go to your design diaries to see for proof of your work. If your design diary is empty and there's any misunderstandings, you're the one who's going to lose your marks. So if you want to support the work you're putting into your group, you need a record of it that's dated, in your design diaries. And it's really important whatever you put in your design diaries is dated. So if you're in a particular lecture, whatever date, that date, but it's your thoughts, your exercises in class, which could be over here, your tutorial work, your project work. It's a way to demonstrate the process and your understanding and learning along the way. Okay, so please engage with your design diaries because it's a way of us knowing that you've done the work. It's a way of you documenting what you've done, and it forces you to engage with the content and think about it. Okay. The individual reflection, I've just put a little bit here. It'll be released as a separate document as part of the design diary. But basically, the idea is that you're going to reflect on what you've learned in your group project in terms of your lessons learned and in relation to a topic that's relevant to HCI. And you're going to be expected to include reputable sources and references. There are just some ideas of topics here. There's inclusive design, prototyping, measuring usability, mobile design patterns. We've got other topics here. You're welcome to go and find your own topic and check with your tutor. But the important thing is, please ensure your selected theme is different from your other project group members. Okay, there's enough themes that there's 4 of you in the project. You should not all have the same theme. Okay, because otherwise you're talking and discussing the same things. Okay. The other thing that I've added into it, this is not something you have to do, but it's something I'm encouraging you to think about. And I'm going to take a step back and explain to you. So I'm a cognitive psychologist. Okay, that means I understand how people learn and how they acquire knowledge. The AI tools of the future and of present rely on you to have knowledge to make judgments as to whether they're giving you valuable output or not. If you come to university and you rely on the AI tools, you don't acquire the knowledge that you'll then need when you go into industry to use the tools to better support you with the processes you want to do. Because if I just go and give something to the AI tool and I don't have the knowledge to make a judgment about whether what it's doing is hallucinating or not quite correct or whatever, I can't use that knowledge properly. So your goal as students is to come to university and acquire the knowledge. Then when you go out into industry, you want to be able to use the AI tools to speed up the processes, to make yourselves more efficient, and to know when they're doing a really bad job, and to not rely on what they're spitting out, and when they're doing a good job, and to take on board what they're doing. But if you start using the tools now when you're at university, you're going to land up in industry and you're going to fall flat on your face because you don't have the knowledge. And I've been hearing more and more stories from people in industry that they hire people and they don't have the skills and they actually can't do the job because they haven't acquired the knowledge. So you need to take responsibility for your learning and say, yes, I want the marks, but also I want to make sure I come out of here with the knowledge. Okay, therefore, as I say, I'm a cognitive psychologist. I understand how important knowledge acquisition is to be able to then apply and use the technology properly. If you don't have the background knowledge, you fall flat on your face. So I'm trying to support you as best I can. But what I've done then is in this theme, I want you to be aware of what tools are out there and how they could support you into the future. And what are the pros and cons? I've already spoken about some of the cons and the pros, okay? And how would you bring that into the actual topic when you go into industry and its relevance, okay? So I'm not ignoring that it's out there, but I'm saying if you go and you rely on the tools too early in your knowledge acquisition, you're not doing yourselves a favor, and I'm trying to support your learning and your knowledge acquisition as a teacher. And that's what I'm trying to do, work with you to help you learn better so that you come out of this course with the skills to then be successful in industry. Okay, so just so we're clear on that. That's why I'm not saying go ahead and use them as much as you like. So this is just plagiarism and AI. Okay, so you assistance only. And I decided it was silly not to allow that because there's people who come from different backgrounds and different countries, and English isn't their first language, and the editing can be really useful. So I've allowed the simple editing, but you're not meant to be using the AI for the idea generation. And the other thing is there any questions about whether you've used AI or not? I've got a simple solution. I'm going to interview you, and you're going to have to show the steps of how you got to the point you did, and you're going to have to answer questions about your knowledge of what you've supposedly written. And if you've used AI, it's going to be very obvious. Okay, so there's going to be one-on-one interviews with obviously another person there as a backup to support both sides as a non-vested party. But I don't want to be put in that situation, so please just don't use the tools. It ensures that you learn, and it ensures I'm not put in a situation I don't want to be in. Okay, so just so we're clear on why I'm not supporting it. That doesn't mean I don't acknowledge they have their place, but not when you're learning. They have their place in improving your productivity when you're out there in the workforce and you've acquired the knowledge and you've learned already. And then you can make value judgments on what they do and don't support you with. Any questions about that? So the reason I explain that in such detail is I don't want anyone to think I'm being unfair. I'm actually trying to support you with the process. That's why I've made this decision. And I've actually done a lot of reading about the problems it's causing in people's knowledge and their learning. And I'm trying to make sure that I do my job as an educator and still support you all as best I can. Okay, so the group spec is one of student collaboration, okay? So the whole idea is that during COVID, everything went online, okay? And it caused this disconnection for the young people, okay? And the fact that, there's still so few of you in the lecture, unfortunately supports what's going on because the online makes things easier in a lot of ways. But what we want you to think about is something that's meaningful to you as students. So how can you use technology to facilitate and support face-to-face student collaboration with a shared purpose? Okay, so developing an app that allows you to do that, okay? It could have something to do with study meetups, maybe playing sports, book clubs, outings, trips. If people want to brainstorm now, I'm happy to brainstorm with you if you're not sure what it means or ask me questions. Anything that students would be interested in collaborating around as students. The other reason I like the idea of using students is it gives you very easy access to a population of users to test with because you can use other students. So it makes your user testing a little bit easier as well. But yes, it's just a shared purpose for student collaboration, whether it's sports or studying or working on a project together or an assignment or trips or outings or book clubs, because those are things that students are all interested in engaging with. And as I say, too many things have gone online and it's affecting everyone negatively. It could be around hobbies, in anything, group cleanups, the environment, something like that. Any of those things are fine. So the idea is to brainstorm and come up with ideas that, and obviously your goal is also to try and find something that's not out there already and do something that hasn't been done. So you don't want to be replicating things that are already out there. The idea is you want to come up with something different. Okay, so this is about the fact that the problem is not what we think it is. And we need to first find out what the problem is. And he speaks really well. So I'm going to play this because it's worthwhile listening to. And it's about that your app you built can solve a problem that you may not even know exists. Sorry, I don't have a choice. You're going to... Oh, and the audio's not on. Oh dear.
meshes around there. Whoa, 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 whoa. You're moving too fast.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I've got all my audio channels set to full, and it's on full on the computer. I'm going to have to call someone from, there's obviously a broken audio channel somewhere, but hopefully you could still watch the captioning and get the whole idea that if we come to people and give them the problem, that creates part of the issues. Now, unfortunately, you've all gone through the system where you expect a problem. So I have given you a problem. I've tried to keep it broad on purpose. If I don't give you a problem, it makes it more difficult because it's not what you used to. But if you want to come up with a new and different problem that you want to solve, that broadly fits into things that students do, please discuss it with your tutor, bring it to me. I'm open for people being creative and thinking outside the box. But I'm also mindful of the fact that this is a university and people expect some sort of constraints. But it's really important about, in terms of design thinking, empathize.
What the frick is wrong with Echo?
You're doing and what you're interested in. Experience and familiar all of you are with Figma. So in tomorrow's lecture, we'll do a poll about that because it just affects how much. Detail we go into in the lecture, getting people familiar with Figma. And basically, the whole idea here is that you have your paper, your electronic, and then your beta version in React Native. All right, so the group project. I'm just going to quickly go through the steps of the group project, okay? The checkpoint 1, which is in week 4, is actually worth the most. So it means in week 2, you really need to get into your group projects. It's going to include your questionnaire, your summary and conclusions from it, your observations, and your journey maps, which I'll go into what they are, but showing the pain points and the issues. And you're going to have personas as well, which are meant to be based on user research, scenarios for each persona, empathy mapping, which I'll also go into in the next lecture, and you're going to then use that to come up with a problem statement.
Empathy mapping.
So I'm going to cover some of this in the next lecture, so I'm not going to go into exactly what each are, but I put it in the lecture slides and I'm breaking it down for you. So it's going to involve brainstorming, categorizing, then having user stories, user story mapping as well. and it's going to be due in Moodle. The final documents get submitted in Moodle, and during week 4, you will show it to your tutors. Okay, so some of the marking will happen in class, but the documents will be submitted as well. The other thing that I'm keeping, because I had it last year and the feedback was positive, is a 1-minute video. Okay, the idea of the 1-minute video is it gives a broad overview of what it is you're designing. Okay, the feedback I got from students is they didn't want everyone else to see their ideas too early on because they were worried other people would take on board what they were doing. So the solution I had last year was we could share them later on in the course if everyone else was happy with that. So the tutors will find out what you want, but at very least all the tutors, including myself, will be able to see what your ideas are and use that to give you some broad feedback. That'll be in the spec as well, what's involved with that. And then in week 5, you have a prototype, which will include your information architecture and your initial test plan as well as the prototype itself. And once again, it's due in class, but it will also be submitted in Moodle. The other thing is, because there's marking happening in class, please make sure you arrive on time for your tutorials, because we can't have everybody go last. Somebody has to go first, and if you're chosen to go first and you're not there, it makes it very awkward for your other group members to have to go through it without you, and it does affect the experience for everyone. All right, and week 7 is your prototype in Figma, the second iteration. So it's a summary of your changes made and a usability test plan as well for testing the second iteration, and that's due in week 7. And week 10 then is your final prototype, which is in React Native, and it's the beta-coded version, which is worth 16%, and the 2% is a summary of what's going on. And there is, well, we'll put a link to it as well in Moodle, but you need to all get into GitLab as well. So you need to make sure you've got an account. Most of you as CSE students should have used it already, but you do need to get into that. All right, so I'm a little bit behind where I wanted to be because of the issues with the technical stuff, but I'm carry on from here. So what we want to talk about now is the idea of the fact that mobile devices are ubiquitous and they're everywhere. Okay, so we can be sitting in a lecture, we can be sitting in the garden, we can be on a walk, we can be on public transport, we can be in a work meeting, and we still have access to our mobile devices. In some situations, we wouldn't want to talk. In other situations, we wouldn't actually be able to hold it with both hands. All sorts of different environments where in other situations we may want privacy, but we use it in lots of different environments. And the key thing is we want an experience that's both efficient and discoverable. And mobile user experience refers to the design of positive mobile device experiences and wearables that strongly focuses on those two things of efficiency and discoverability. And efficiency means that it does things quickly and easily, and people don't have to wait. And discoverability means that you want your app to be easy to discover both in terms of finding where things are, but in terms of there's so many other apps out there. Why would people choose yours and why would they use yours? So it refers to both those things in terms of discoverability. And yeah, that's probably all. Oh, the other thing, I knew there was something else. There's not a direct textbook or anything in terms of readings for the course, but I put links on most of the lecture slides, so if you want to go and read further about the idea or something, you can. I also sometimes put links in terms of each week for the lectures, but the idea is that it's an ever-evolving and changing space, and it's about design, and so there's not a single resource that has everything, and so because it's project-based course, we sort of do it a little bit differently, which is why if you find a good resource, it's a nice idea to share it with everyone else. All right, so what is the main differences between mobile and desktop? So on mobile, people engage with devices at crucial points, meaning they don't necessarily want the same level of detail and for much shorter periods of time. And they use it in many more places. Okay, so which is what I've referred to as well already, the fact that you may be in different environments and you have slightly different ways you may need to use the device. So what I want you to think about now, so what are some of the places that you typically like to use your mobile device versus what are some of the places you typically would use your desktop? So like now in the lecture, which is more useful? Okay, and why is it more useful? A bigger screen, yep. Easier to type, okay. And what are some of the other things you'd use your desktop for? Coding, yep. For the same reasons, it's easier to type when you have a bigger screen, yep. The mobile, you're saying, or the desktop, which one? The mobile. Okay, so the mobile's easier to take with you, so if you're just writing ideas quickly or jotting something down, yep. Okay, the bigger screen allows you to see things in a different way with more information, so you can do that. Exactly. That's a really important one, the ability to have multiple tabs and tasks open on the desktop. Okay, we focus on the desktop. What are some of the things the mobile's good for that you can't do as easily with the desktop? It can track your motion. Okay, yep. So what would be something that tracks your motion you'd like to use it for? That's correct, though. Okay, yep. If you're running and you want to track your steps. If you're running and you want to be able to contact someone as well. So it makes you more connected while you're moving around. Yep, which relates to the tracking where you are, the navigation and maps, because you're moving and you want something that you can put in your pocket easily and still work out where you are. Yep, they're very distracting on your desktop, but maybe on a device you're walking around with, you're happy to check while you're walking around. So yep. Photo, yep. You can take a photo from the desktop, but it's easier on the mobile. It's easier for a few reasons. Why would you say it's easier? Yep, out and about. So it's something you can put in your pocket. But the other thing is, if you think about the size, if you're trying to take a photo with a large device and put it in the right angle and whatever. But actually, if you're recording a video, depending on the context, it can actually be easier on your desktop. Because it's still, and it's in a one particular space, and it's easier to keep in that spot. Yeah, yeah. For a lecture, the desktop's easier. So depending on the context and what your goal is. Okay. All right, one of the things, that's great. One of the things I wanted you to also think about is how the device capabilities affect what we use it for. Okay, there's something in particular I'm thinking about. I may not give you the right hints to work it out, but we'll see. There was something that didn't exist before COVID that could exist because some device capability became available around the time of COVID, and it changed the way we do things. Can people think what that was? When people were still in COVID, it was so obvious. Now we've moved on, it's not as obvious. Something we didn't do before, we suddenly started doing. Yes, that's correct, but I'm talking about your phones. What did we do on the phones? Yeah, Yep, a few of you got it at once. Thank you. QR codes. Now, the thing about QR codes is they relied on the camera being able to have certain functionality and almost what I probably refer to as computer vision capabilities. And they happened to be available just around that time. And because of the functionality that was available, suddenly QR codes became a thing that was widely embraced. But they weren't used before that, and it could only existed because of the device capabilities that were out there. So basically, as the device capabilities become more and more, there are going to be things that didn't exist before that may exist. And I suspect the AI is going to change some of those things quite quickly into the future. I don't know, are there things people are aware of that maybe didn't exist because of a device capability that's come around in the last 12 months that I haven't thought of? I always like the students to challenge me and think of something I haven't thought of. Yes? VR? In terms of AI. Oh yes, the augmented reality. So no question that we're moving along in that space. And as the technology expands, the things we do with augmented reality are growing all the time. And they do rely on certain device capabilities. So that is a space that's changing. For me, I get a bit motion sick when I put the glasses on. So I don't particularly enjoy that user experience. So for me, it hasn't quite got to the point where I'd want to embrace it. Apparently I'm 10% of the population, but it is a problem, or whatever the proportion is, for some people. So we haven't quite got to the point of the user experience where everyone would want to embrace it. But thank you. So this is coming back to what we were saying. And this just shows you where we are in terms of the digital population. Basically, there are 5.6 billion people who own mobile phones. Bit scary how big the market is. And the internet is 5.4 billion. Just 5 years ago, this was still in the low billions. Now I think it had just reached 1 billion, and we're already now at 5 billion. So it just keeps increasing and increasing. Probably about 5 years ago, it was just over 1 billion in terms of actual mobile phone subscribers. So it keeps just going up and up and up. And I've left this here. This comes from my slides during COVID. And the reason I left this here is because it changed the way we used our apps and what we did with our apps. And during COVID, what happened is travel and hospitality. So travel was reduced, and areas of hospitality went away. But instead, we were doing home delivery and Uber Eats, and we weren't traveling, so we were doing other things instead. Online shopping grew because we weren't allowed to go out. And the COVID check-ins and the QR codes became a thing. We moved a bit back to pre-COVID levels in terms of we're now traveling again, all the things around that. But the QR codes are still there, and some of the things we learned to do, like do more of our shopping online, have remained after COVID. So the context of what's going on in the world also affects what's going on online in our app usage, which is why I left that slide in. Okay, so the interesting thing is I think this would have changed now compared to what it was last year already. So what is your most used app, and how long would you spend on your phone each day? So I think this is the wrong link into the whiteboard. So I'll...
Supposed to copy this.
I'm interested in your most used app, so you can just type what it is and how long you think you spend on your phone each day. Now, you know what's really interesting, Malia? When I set this whiteboard up, I anonymized it so that you can't see who everyone is. And because it forced us to then go back and make people join through the organization, the anonymized has gone. That's exactly why it wasn't working. I've just worked it out. I made it anonymous. Maybe I won't use a whiteboard through UNSW next time. I wanted to make it so that it was anonymous. And it wouldn't let you get in when I made it anonymous. Sorry. It becomes this whole thing of competing things. When you set one thing, it affects the other. And so TikTok, Instagram, FaceTime, Twitter. 2 hours, 5 hours. So this is about how long you spend on your phone. I'd say the person who's spending 2 hours is doing very well. Even I spend longer than that. And I'm not in your demographic. But I do know the younger demographic tends to be 6 to 8 hours. That's what it tends to be. So if you're sitting at 4 hours or 5 hours, you're doing quite well. You may also be underestimating. Think about how productively you could use all that time and what sorts of things you're actually doing on the phones. And if it's actually socializing and engaging or just watching random things, especially if you're on Instagram or YouTube, what are you actually engaging with? So as I say, there are two questions. The one is how long you think you spend on your device in a day. And you can actually go to the device and it'll tell you your average time. It is in your settings. And the other is your most used. Okay, so the interesting thing is your most used apps are actually pretty similar to what I had last year. I wondered if the AI may have changed the way some of you were doing things. But it doesn't seem to have in terms of what the most used apps are. So that's good to see. You're still socializing and interacting with each other and watching content and stuff. But yes, I think the 8 hours, the 6 to 8 hours is more representative of what the data actually says for your user group. So I'll show you the stats. So this is the number of smartphone users. It's interesting. It's a different stat to the other one. The other one said, well, the other one was just about people who had devices, and this one's about smartphones specifically. So, but anyway, it's a slightly different stat. I got it from different places. And 50% of people are on their mobile devices, and it says here 18 to 24-year-olds spend 66% of their digital media time on smartphones, and they're saying 4.2 hours on apps. But that's all age groups. That's not just the one. And then 87% of smartphone users spend their time on apps as well. And the gaming market is worth an unbelievable amount, and TikTok's the most downloaded non-gaming app. And a really important thing, 70% of mobile app users will abandon an app if it takes too long to load. So when you're designing your apps, you need to think about battery life. If it's draining your battery, people will stop using it as well. And if it's taking too long to download, they're not interested. And look at the amount of money that they generate. Okay, yeah, this is a slightly older slide, but the demographics are still the same, and it's sort of more about hours by age group. And you can see it sort of goes down as the age group increases. And this is more about the types of things people use apps for, and it's pretty similar for males and females, but it's mostly for gaming and social and music. And how do people find apps? This is also interesting. Friends and family and browsing the App Store are the two main ways people find apps, but it can be the other options as well. So in terms of being interested in how apps get out there, these are just useful stats. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about, and I'm a little bit behind where I wanted to be, was hybrid and native development of apps, okay? So a native app is one that gets designed for a specific platform, and the two most platforms are Android and iOS. And basically, while developing a native app for Android, developers prefer using Android Studio in Java or Kotlin languages. And for iOS development, it gets driven by Xcode, and the languages adopted by the developers are either Swift or Objective-C. And then you have hybrid, which is React Native. And it's an open source JavaScript framework that was actually created by Facebook. And the whole idea is it would allow cross-platform development. And it's revolutionized the whole idea of app development by having this cross-platform tool. And the native apps basically deploy JavaScript code that can be then deployed on either iOS or on Android. And the idea behind the React Native is you don't have to then develop something separately for your two different platforms. But I've got the next slide goes through the pros and cons of the two. I'll just point out, though, that the React Native, just to remind you all again, starts from week 2, Wednesday morning online. So your React Native is more cost-effective, but it has deployment issues and reduced speed. On the other hand, your native has much higher security, a better UX that's customized for your particular environment. It has a large community around debugging and problem solving in your particular environment, but it does have a higher cost. And ultimately, the higher cost is something that people are very concerned about. So native applications have higher productivity because there's this whole community out there. They can run faster often. You're designing with a particular environment in mind, so the look and feel can often be more customized, and you have this whole developer community. Having said that, React Native has now established its own developer community, so even that probably is less of an issue nowadays. But it's easier to include complexity into your native app because you're coding in that specific environment. So the React Native, the big thing is the low budget and that it's easily cross-platform. And nowadays, there's fast updates in the App Store. The debugging there's a whole process around that that's become much easier. And the main issues around the React Native are often the reduced speed because you haven't developed for that particular platform, and you can have deployment issues on your particular device as well. So, but because it's growing, it's obviously what people are interested in developing skills in. This is just a graph of the size of the different communities, and the React Native is clearly growing compared to the Swift and the Kotlin. So I did this each year for the last 3 years, and the graph looked exactly the same, so I didn't regenerate it this year because this is the way the communities are growing, and this seems to be what's happening in the space. Okay, so what are your differences between mobile and the traditional sort of desktop design? The big thing is the screen size, which we spoke about already. Your reduced screen real estate is something you need to focus on in mobile design. The context of use. So a big thing with context of use with a mobile is we all do this. You don't do that on your desktop, screen orientation, okay? And you have to take that into account when you're designing, that your user may do that. The other thing is using one hand as well. And the scrolling is different on the mobile to the desktop. But the context of use is really important. We tend to use mobiles often on a noisy piece of public transport, while we tend to not use our desktops as much in that type of environment. So even your input and output may be slightly different, bearing that in mind. So the screen orientation I just showed you, the scrolling can be quite different on the desktop versus the mobile. The other thing is connectivity. Often on the mobile, you're in environments that have patchy connectivity. If you're relying on high bandwidth, people are not going to want to use your app. Apps that rely on high bandwidth don't work well on the mobile. It's the reality. While we tend to be in places that have better connectivity when we're using our desktop, we'll actually go somewhere where we know the Wi-Fi is good or whatever because we need higher bandwidth. And battery life is a big thing. Particularly on a mobile, if the app drains your battery, you're not going to want to use it. I've heard people say, oh, don't use that app, it drains your battery. I'm sure you've all had that happen to you. It's not something you want. And I just tried to look for some useful links for you. There's a few articles there. There's also some resources that point you to other links as well. Okay, so I've still got another few minutes that I'll just go through. I'm just looking where my activity is. It's a bit further on, is it? You know what, I'll do the activity tomorrow. It's fine. It's the same week. So questions? Anything about assessments I haven't made clear at this point? You can always put them in the forum if you go away and think of them. Deployment. Because it's not customized to the particular environment it's running in. It can have reduced speed, it's deployment speed. I'm going to try and remember your names. I'll try if I can at least remember the people who come to lectures' names. It should be achievable. I'll check my working memory limitations. All right, so one of the things that I'm interested to know is what do you hope to take away from the course and how can we help you achieve it? After having listened to what I said, are you more interested in the coding still, which is okay, because that's what's going to help you get a job, or are you more interested in the design, just so that I know what your real goals are?
I'm more interested in the coding.
What else do people want to get from the course? Okay, all right, so I'll try and bring that into my lectures as I talk. I try to do that a little bit with even just talking. I'll tell you another thing about cognitive load that is worth being aware of is hybrid lectures. The hybrid lectures are the most cognitively overloading thing for both the students and the lecturer, okay? And the reason they don't work well is I, as a lecturer, am meant to be engaging with you, and what am I doing? I'm looking at the questions online, and I'm typing the answer, and then you've come to the lecture, and I'm not giving you my full attention. And then you're like also looking at the questions and trying to see what am I answering, and it affects the experience for everyone. And I have split attention, and I get split between engaging with you, and I feel that if you've come to the lecture, I should be engaging with you. So I much prefer lecture recordings and live lectures to reduce the split attention for the people who come, as well as for the people then who are listening can listen to it in their own environment. They can fast forward, they can stop, they can speed up, whatever they want to do. So I will try and bring in some of my cognitive load ideas as I go along. What else are people hoping to get from the course? All right, well, if I'm not addressing what you're hoping to get, please do let me know. All right, so I'll just spend 5 minutes on this and then I'll carry on tomorrow online. So what is UX, UI, so user interface, user experience, and everything in between. So this is your UI, okay? Your glass bottle is probably your more attractive UI versus the plastic bottle, which is the other UI. And this is your user experience. And your user experience from the glass bottle is half the ketchup comes out in one go, while your user experience is you can control the amount that comes out from the plastic bottle. So the UI for the glass bottle is beautiful, but the functionality and the user experience is impaired. So you need to always think not just about the UI, but the UX as well. And the user experience here is, okay, so you've got what people are looking for, which is your content. The tool that serves it up is your user interface. And then the user experience where you combine everything and you are consuming it. So you're bringing it together in an effective manner. And here's another example. You have content, which is all your items here. And on your desktop, you have a lot of the items that you're there. On your tablet, you have reduced, but you still have content. And then on your mobile, slightly different as well. All right, I will go into what is design thinking, and then I think I'll stop the lecture. So design thinking is an iterative process, and there are many steps in this process. If you go and you actually Google what is design thinking, there are lots of different ways of actually visualizing design thinking. Some come up with 6 steps, some come up with 9, some come up with a totally circular process, the others are less. The important thing is that it's a series of steps that help support you in designing something in a certain way where you take on board the empathy and try and understand your users in the process. It's a way of thinking, it's a methodology to solve problems. Apple, Google, Airbnb, Uber Eats, Netflix, and many other big companies have actually adopted design thinking when they go and design their products and their tools and their interfaces. So it's grounded in research, and it starts with this whole idea of empathy of your users. And it involves observation and questioning to try and work it out what it is that people need and want. And once you understand the context in which people are doing something, you can then come up with an idea. So this here shows you that you identify their needs, you empathize with them, define, ideate, prototype, evolve, and it iterates, okay? And it shows that everything's connected. And then if you look at this, here it shows that it's a non-linear process. Another example, okay? So if you go and look in the literature, there's the whole idea of iteration, but there's also the idea that it doesn't have to be linear as well. The empathy is an important component, and the prototyping and the testing are also quite important later on in the design thinking literature. But the key thing is it's a series of phases that help you develop a solution to a problem, and it's heavily used out there in industry. Oops. I actually have time to go. I'm looking at the time. What's the time? I've got a few more minutes till the lecture ends. This is probably a good place to end. The next one's a problem, and I can let you think about the problem. Okay, I'll come back to it. Basically, this is a well-known problem that demonstrates some of the issues around how people solve problems and why they struggle to solve problems. This is a truck that got stuck under a bridge and it blocked traffic. Okay, we have this happen in our wonderful harbour tunnel all the time. Okay, but the truck was too big and it was firmly lodged under the bridge. And basically, it caused massive traffic problems. Emergency personnel arrived and they were trying to dismantle the truck and they were trying to basically get things moving, and they were struggling. Okay, what is the solution to solve this problem? There were engineers involved and firefighters, and the way they looked at the problem meant that they struggled to solve it. They were looking at it in the wrong way. Their prior knowledge as experts actually interfered with them being able to solve it. Removing the tires is quite time consuming and not so easy when it's stuck under the bridge, but that could be a solution. There's an even easier one than that. They were also trying to take the bridge apart and dismantle part of the bridge and whatever, but there's an easier solution than that. That's not a bad solution though. Okay, so the cutting edge up thinking like an engineer, which is where your prior knowledge is getting in the way. You're clearly an engineer. That would be a wonderful solution, but it's stuck and we need to get it out. It's like the trucks in the harbour tunnel. If we could stop them, we wouldn't have it blocked every few weeks. It's stuck. We can't do that. That's also an engineering type of solution. It's not a bad one, but it's totally lodged there. No. That could be an option to try and dig the ground. It's quite a difficult and technical task. Yeah, that's the answer.
Oh, what the fuck? What was the answer?
They were also trying to take the bridge apart and dismantle part of. Okay, so that would be a wonderful solution, but it's stuck and we need to get it out. It's like the trucks in the harbour tunnel. If we could stop them, we wouldn't have it blocked every few weeks. It's not a bad one, but it's totally lodged there. No. That could be an option to try and dig the ground. It's quite a difficult and technical task. Yeah, that's the answer.
Doesn't matter. Oh, that was the HMP.
Experience that I began to spot a problem. I spotted something that was going to halt the very ability of our young people to contribute to a creative, sustainable, and fascinating world for them. And for the last 18 months, I've been working with schools all around the world. Successful people have a success rate of 1. You see, education systems, problem generated by their fascinating challenge he was up against. He said the biggest educational problem he had was finding a problem that hadn't been solved yet. Simon is undertaking that traditional
So for the first 9 years of my career, I spent time in the field of design, designing high-tech products and services. But I got to a point where I started to feel that I was missing something. And I began to ask myself why I was making some time to spend the next 4 years on what it means and acting. And as I did this, I kept seeing the same pattern happen over and over and over again. And the pattern was as follows. The way I think often prevents my ability to create new meaning and value from my interaction with others. And I only realized what that limiting way of thinking was in hindsight. Let me give you an example. So one day I was in the wood shop, and I was making a piece of artwork with wood. And I was using a Japanese handsaw at the moment, and this is a picture of the saw I was using. This is how it sounded like. So I was sawing away, and all of a sudden a carpenter standing all the way at the other end of the shop starts yelling at me. He's like, "Hey you, listen to the wood." I was like, "Excuse me?" And he starts walking towards me. He says, "You have to understand, the wood is very honest. If you're willing to listen, it'll tell you how you're doing." And I was like, "I have no idea what you're talking about." And he says, "Watch this." And he takes the wood I've been sawing, unclamps it, lowers it down, reclamps it, and says, "Do it again." And I do it again. And this is how the sound changed. And once again, this is how it previously sounded. The problem was that I clamped the wood too high. So every time I would saw, it would wobble a bit. And that was creating a lot of rumbling noise. But I swear to God, I had heard that sound. But I thought it was just a generic sound of sawing. I didn't find it particularly meaningful or valuable. But in hindsight, of course, this was obvious. So obvious, in fact, I couldn't understand why I hadn't thought of it in the first place. So incidents like this was happening over and over again. And it was easy to brush this off as kind of being mundane, and hindsight being 20/20 is not a new idea. Then I tried it. And I quickly realized that this was a lot more difficult than I thought. As she sat there sobbing. You see, what I realized at that moment was that everything I'd been telling her up to that point was framed in such a way that it was all her fault. And I had nothing to do with it. I thought of her as a problem to be solved, and I myself as a problem solver, thinking that a problem solver could not possibly be a part of the problem. But of course, in hindsight, I actually started off thinking I already knew the answer. And the answer was so simple. She just had to cheer up. I thought if I could only logically convince her to accept this wonderfully simple solution, that she would snap out of her depression. But of course, I misunderstood. The solution to the problem wasn't a matter of selling her on my ideas. It was coming to realize my own assumptions, my implicit role-playing, my unawareness of my own prejudice. If anybody had to snap out of it, it was me. And once I realized this, all I had to do was express that story back to her sincerely. A story so completely unexpected, yet in hindsight so simple, so obvious, and even logical, that I couldn't understand why I hadn't thought of it in the first place. You see, reflecting on that incident, what I've come to realize is that the process it takes to empathize with another person mirrors the creative process. Now, why do I say that? In the beginning of the story I just told, I started off not empathizing with my friend, which is to say that I felt separate from her, empathizing. And I want to call it realizing empathy. Empathy realizing involuntarily. A technical term being having an insight. That's precisely what happened between me and my friend. Now, what got me to that insight? What did I have to do to get that insight? Well, many things, but first of all, I had to engage my friend in a conversation. In other words, the conversation was required before that light bulb could go off. And during that conversation, what else happened? Because I'm thinking of all the different things that happened during the conversation, and there's many, many different things that happened. But if there's one thing I want to highlight today, it's that I learned the choice to become honest. And now let me explain what I mean by learning the choice to be honest, because it's not the same thing as not lying. Now remember the story of wood. Did I think the sound of sawing was insignificant? Of course I did. Remember the story of my friend. Did I know about the event that had happened earlier in the day? Of course I did. But did I ever outwardly acknowledge, express, or otherwise act on that honesty? No. In fact, I ignored it. I brushed it off. I was not being honest. But that's not because I had the intention to deceive. It's because I didn't have a choice. After all, I didn't see a value in being honest about that. Why should I be honest about that particular thing in that particular moment if I don't see the value? What would be the point? It's like sitting in a lecture hall, listening to a speaker that I cannot understand. Maybe I feel stupid and lost, but I look around and nobody's asking any questions. So what do? I keep my mouth shut. Why? Because I don't want to be judged stupid. There's no value in that happening. In fact, the value is negative. But if I'm not honest, right, that's the only way in which we can learn that. So what happens as we go through the creative process is that we don't just create things, we create new meaning and value from something we perceived little to no value or meaning previously. And in that process, we learn a new choice with which to not only see others, but also ourselves, to be honest with ourselves. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying this is easy. It's in fact a struggle a lot of times, as it was the case for me. But if we want to learn a new choice with which to see, we have to be willing to listen to another. And the feedback happens only once a year. I was the sweetest person in the entire world. But he said, because you project so much confidence in the way you speak and the way you lead meetings, I don't feel comfortable sharing my disagreements with you. He said, because you come so prepared with such a clear vision in mind, I don't feel comfortable contributing my own ideas. I was surprised. I had no idea that my behaviors could be perceived that way. And to this day, I can't say how grateful I am to have had that opportunity to see myself in a different way. In fact, I rethought the very idea of what it means to look into the mirror. Because when we look into the mirror, it's not just that we're looking at ourselves. We're looking at ourselves from a different perspective. It's only when we're willing to look at ourselves from a different perspective that we can learn something new about ourselves that we do not or cannot otherwise know. Now, if there's anything I've learned in the past 5 years of doing this research, it's that we don't see anyone or anything the way they are. We see them as we want to. And for that reason, the first step to realizing empathy, the Latin root for respect is respectus, which means the act of looking back at one. In other words, the very act of choosing how to look has everything to do with respect. To respect is the possibility of finding a new angle from which to look, but that new angle will be surprising, but so obvious in hindsight. I'll end with a summary. When we think of the idea of connection, we think of two separate circles connected by a line. But in light of the stories I shared with you today, I want to propose an alternate model. I want you to envision a whole circle, separated by a line we call judgment. And by becoming honest, by becoming aware of how we judge at any given moment, and not repressing or disregarding or brushing it off, by learning the choice to become honest about them, we can momentarily blur that line and empower ourselves to experience the whole circle and to experience that sense of connection. Thank you.
What? I learned nothing from that video.
Affinity diagramming is a method for organizing related facts into distinct clusters. It's a fast and efficient way for teams to collaborate as they distill and prioritize findings from user research and strategy or design workshops, among other things. The process involves a lot of sticky notes and these 3 steps. First, generating ideas during a research session or UX workshop. Observers or attendees write down their observations or ideas, each one on a separate sticky note. Second, organize these into categories, then subcategories. And third, prioritize the notes in each category. Start by choosing a room with walls on which you can stick the sticky notes. If those don't exist, try using flip chart paper as a base. Put all the notes on the wall. This makes the meeting move faster. You may write a few subcategory names to help get the sorting started, and post those in different areas of the room. Include a question mark or parking lot category name for notes that aren't understandable. Put some pens and markers and blank pads of sticky notes on the table. At the start of the meeting, the leader should explain the process and set a time limit for each phase. In the post-it, stick it on a blank area of the wall, and call out the topic name. If the results are from a usability test, remind attendees that each color represents a different user. If the same finding is written more than once, stack them on top of one another, with the most descriptive one showing. After the notes are sorted into categories, the meeting leader should direct the team to then sort those categories using blank post-it notes to write a subcategory name. If you finish a category and there are more to do, move on to another one. If someone is still working on a category, and call out times as needed. This is an important step, and it helps foster a shared understanding of the findings or ideas. Next, prioritize the findings or ideas. This step makes sense of a lot of findings, and it helps direct the team on where to focus next. There are many ways to prioritize, and feel free to be creative here. For usability test findings, one way we prioritize them is to ask people to vote on them, raising their hands to indicate whether they think each item is of high, medium, or low importance. Dot voting is another method. Give each person 3 dots and ask them to allocate their dots on the findings they feel are most important. With UX strategy plans and design ideas from ideation workshops, we sometimes prioritize with other methods like assigning a monetary value to each idea out of a stated budget, or rating elements on a 1 to 7 importance scale. After prioritization, some teams end the meeting by writing themes on whiteboards. Others take photos of the wall, others track everything in a spreadsheet. It's important to summarize and communicate what will happen next with the information, and suggest or assign action items as needed, so your team will use the information to drive design. This process may seem like a lot of work for your team, especially for those who are not in UX roles. I used to try to protect others from what I consider the messy, difficult parts of design and research. I thought I should do the work for them and tell them the results, but I learned that insulating team members does them a disservice. Instead, with methods like affinity diagramming, people learn more about users and good design, and become more invested in UX. It also builds consensus and fosters a shared understanding of users.
go to the lecture. Should I go? Where is the lecture? Okay, what about 3222? Lectures? Where's the lecture recording? There they are. That's fun tomorrow. Might as well do a React Native workshop then. React Native tutorial. 2 hours. Do I have 2 hours? 2023. React to React Native in 12 minutes. What the frick is whatever. Let's just watch the flash.
React Native. Write JavaScript and React to build apps for iOS, Android, and the web from a single codebase. According to Atwood's law, any application that can be written in JavaScript will eventually be written in JavaScript. The first way JS developers tried to build mobile apps was by wrapping their native applications in a sandbox browser called a web view, using tools like Apache Cordova and Adobe PhoneGap. The philosophy is write once, run anywhere. This works, but it can be hard to make a website feel like a true native experience. React Native takes a different approach. It feels just like React DOM for the web, but instead of using HTML and the DOM as building blocks for the UI, it uses the native components that you would find on iOS and Android. The philosophy is learn once, write anywhere. You can't just take your existing React web app and upload it to the App Store, but you can use the React skills you already have to build a native app without ever having to touch Java or Objective-C. Instead, you import building block components like button, switch, scroll view, and the most fundamental of which is view. At runtime, it will use the true native component on the corresponding platform, like UI view, Android.view, or div on the web. It's like building 3 apps for the price of one, but in some cases, you may want a different visual experience based on the underlying OS. The platform module allows you to check which platform you're on and render different components accordingly. When it comes to visuals, there's no CSS in React Native. Instead, every core component takes a style prop that can be customized with a style sheet constructed from JavaScript. In development, it supports fast refresh, which means you can instantly see the changes you make to your code on any platform. You may also want to tap into native features like the device camera, push notifications, and geolocation. These concerns are handled
4 years ago, is there any one? 2024? It's kind of like 5 hours long. Full course 2 months ago. That's 5 hours long as well. Actually, let me just read the docs. React Native. Get started or learn the basics. Sure. What the fuck? Look when you use a real device datasets, you get to see exactly what your users will see. No, who cares? iOS emulator, sure. I don't have a MacBook. Shit. I have to install Android Studio. Why the fuck is Android Studio? I forgot all its SS. What the heck? I can't even read. Is it Android Gradle plugin? Oh, that's probably what I was looking for. Bro, what the fuck is wrong with this website? Oh, it's probably because I'm not on Google Chrome. Freaking oh, I got this. What the fuck? I need an IDE. It has its own IDE. have frickin' Linux. Click more actions. Open the Android Studio. Sure, I guess I'll download your trash. Why do I need to download Linux 64-bit? Something. That's a lot of gigabytes. Put a setting on your Android SDK. Add an environment variable pointing to the Android. Reload the path environment variables in your current machine. Make sure you can run a database from your temp. Is this how they're doing it in the frickin' the 451 one? What would it be? Oh, it's quite a while ago. Quietly. Can't see anything. Reactive native. Whoops. Should I use Expo or not? Does COP 451 even use Expo? is our course outline? Okay. Blueprints class. I'm gonna make this on my computer. Are you sure my computer can run that, G? What the freak is Unreal Engine? Do I have to download it? How many gigabytes is it gonna take? What was it called? CD, my app. The fuck? How do I even run this? So I have to download this. Let's see how big it is. Download. I don't have Ubuntu. 32 gigabytes of RAM. No, hell no. Hell no. What the fuck? 2.5 gigahertz. How do I check the gigahertz? I've got like less than half of the RAM. need to do